Not much scares me. In truth, it's kind of my thing not to scare easily. I've been writing about spooky legends for years now, digging up old ghost stories and local myths for my blog. I've even been called a skeptic by some of my readers, someone who doesn't believe until they've got evidence staring them right in the face. That's why, alone and under a windless night in late August, I'm out here at Blue Lake Campground in Montana. My campfire, my control experiment, as I like to call it, is supposed to either prove or disprove this one weird legend I found buried in an old travel guide. Fires here supposedly vanish without a trace in the middle of the night. The flame dances on before me, and I narrow my eyes at it in a silent dare to go out. There's no wind, and the air is dead still. It shouldn't be doing that. I toss another log onto the fire. The embers pop, the warmth washing over my face. I tell myself it's nothing. Just a fluke, maybe something to do with the dry air. Still, a small shiver runs down my back. Earlier today, as I was gathering my equipment, I remembered a story my grandfather told. Something about a fire that could suck the soul out of you if you weren't careful. I used to laugh when he told it. Thought it was just one of those creepy stories older people tell kids to keep them in line. Now here I am, standing in the flickering light. Well, I'm not laughing. I shake my head, trying to push that thought away. It's just a fire. A campfire. The night deepens. I decide to do a little exploration, snap some photos for the blog, hopefully find something worthwhile to write about besides yet another creepy atmosphere blog. After about 10 minutes of wandering, my flashlight beam catches something unusual. A small circle of earth, charred, blackened, half-burnt logs scattered about. There is no sign that anyone has slept here recently, but the place feels heavy, like it's holding on to something, like some sort of energy or memory. I snap a picture and attempt to disregard the knot starting to form in my stomach. In an instant, the fire at my campsite goes out, everything plunged into darkness. I freeze. My breath catches in my throat. There's no wind, not even a breeze. 1 second it was there, warm and crackling, and the next, nothing. I draw a deep breath, urging myself to move, fumbling for my lighter. I try to restart it, but my fingers fumble and the lighter sputters uselessly. That's when I see it. Faint, glowing lights dancing through the forest in the distance like fireflies, bobbing in and out of the trees. Except they aren't fireflies. They're too intentional, too calculated, and as I watch, they begin to wink out one after another like other flames being doused. My stomach churns, a needle of fear prickling at my brain's edges. I have to get the fire going again. I need light. I finally turn my back to the flickering lights and am able to get a small flame going. It's weak, but it's enough. I sit down, trying to calm myself, but it's hard to shake the feeling that I'm being watched, that something is out there in the darkness, just beyond the reach of my firelight. The next morning, I crawl out of my tent, aching all over from a non-stop, restless night's sleep. The first thing I notice, the footprints. They're everywhere, pressed into the soft earth around my campsite, circling around my tent but never coming closer, like someone has walked around it all night. My stomach gives a turn as I take this in, and a cold sweat breaks out across my skin. I check the ground for other signs. Cigarette butts that have been dropped. Anything to suggest it's just some prankster who's been messing with me. But there's nothing. Just those footprints leading away, literally away from the campsite into the woods. The day blurs by, and I have tried to write, to focus on my blog, but the words feel forced. I couldn't get the sight of those footprints out of my mind, or the way that fire had gone out so strangely. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadow of the trees. I told myself I was being paranoid, that there was nothing out there. The second night falls heavy, the air thick with anticipation. I sit cross-legged by the fire and fiddle with it with a stick, attempting to keep my mind occupied. It is around midnight when I hear it. A voice, a faint, faraway call of my name. Sarah. My heart stops. It's soft, barely more than a whisper, but it's unmistakable. I stand, my hands shaking, the flashlight in my grip. The voice comes again, and I turn toward it. Far off, through the trees, I see the light, flickering like another campfire. I trudge toward it in one stride, then another. The voice calls out again, beckoning me forward. The forest is alive. The shadows writhe in my passage, and the earth's spongy skin is uneven underfoot. The light flickers, nearly winks out, and as I step into the clearing, I freeze. There's nothing here. Just the edge of a cliff, the drop-off sharp and abrupt. I feel my stomach lurch, the ground seeming to tilt at my feet. Back away, I do, my heart loud in my ears. That would be when I saw it, my campfire far away but burning bright. A problem was there. My tent was gone. My gear, all of it. Gone. Only the fire, hotter and brighter than ever before. A chill ran down my spine, my breathing hitched. I have to get back. I don't remember the run back to the campsite. It's all a blur, branches catching at my clothes, the darkness pressing in from all sides. When finally I break through the tree line, the fire's still burning, but there's nothing else. No tent, no backpack, nothing. Just the fire, roaring, like it's been waiting for me. I don't know what happened that night. I don't want to know. But I gathered the little I had left and moved out of Blue Lake without looking back. All these years, I have written about legends, ghost stories and monster stories, tales of blood-curdling terror. It never occurred to me that one day I would find myself stepping into one, that one day I would be the one fleeing, racing my heart with that cold, dark dread. All I know is fire isn't supposed to vanish like that, and most definitely, it's not supposed to come back. Story 2. There is something about the darkness, the freshness of the air, and the serenity of being all alone under the stars that cleans my head. That's exactly what I was looking forward to tonight. Eagle Rock Campground in Oregon came very highly recommended, replete with these tall, ancient trees and a perfect view of the stars beyond their branches. Maybe for some people a bit too isolated, but for me, it was just what I needed. I had to be alone, to get away. This thing with the divorce really had left me feeling hollow, and reconnecting with nature was the best way to fill that emptiness up, at least cover it up. It was approaching 11 o'clock when I finally set up the camp. The tent was pitched and my tripod ready. I stood in the clear circle, looking up above me at the towering pines surrounding me. The moon barely peeked through the thick canopy, leaving the campsite in this dim, uneven glow. I should have felt at peace. Everything was perfect. But there was something. Not right. I couldn't quite place what seemed off at once. The silence, maybe. The woods were still, unnaturally so. No rustling of leaves, no insects humming in the night, not even the far-off cracking of a branch. Nothing but this emptiness. Turning to my camera, fiddling with the focus, it suddenly came to me. What was bothering me? I couldn't see my shadow. It took but a moment to sink in. I turned, searching the ground in every direction. There wasn't one. My flashlight was on, bright enough to paint the trees around me, but there was no shadow of me. No dark silhouette cast across the dirt. It was as if the light just refused to acknowledge I was there. A chill ran down my spine, and I laughed, mostly to myself. It had to be a trick of the angles, maybe the moonlight canceling it out. I took a great breath in, telling myself it was all nothing. I'd read the local folklore earlier that week about a place of woodland not too far from here, something named the Shadowless Forest. It was only one of those things people spoke to make the woods more mystifying, a campfire ghost tale. People got lost within the forest, never to return again, their shadows stolen by the trees. I'd shrugged it off as mere nonsense at the time. Standing there now, I couldn't shrug off the prickling feeling of unease that crept up the back of my neck. "Hey, you good over there?" a voice called out, startling me. I turned with my heart jolting in my chest. It was the couple I'd noticed setting up their tent earlier, but not too far away from mine. They waved as they approached. Tom and Lily, they'd introduced themselves when I arrived. Seemed nice, experienced campers by the looks of it. Yeah, I'm good. Just thought I saw something weird," I replied, rubbing the back of my neck. They exchanged that knowing glance. "Oh, don't tell me you've heard the shadowless forest stories too," Lily said, grinning. "Tom here's been trying to freak me out about it all day." Tom snorted. "Hey, it's all part of the atmosphere, right? Adds a little thrill to the camping experience." He winked, but I could tell there was something uneasy behind his smile. They remained there for a moment, on the way to their tent, laughing as they went, although it was forced-like, trying to depict that it was just some sort of joke. I again turned back to my camera, forcing myself to focus on what I came here to do. Click a few shots. The shutter snapped loudly in the otherwise silent night. I watched as the images slowly developed on the screen, the grainy outlines of the trees, the dim glow of the moon. Then, though, something caught my eye. A figure half blended into the shadows. I blinked, pushing closer. It wasn't clear far more a shape, an impression, but something was there. Someone was standing just at the edge of the clearing, nearly absorbed by the darkness. My stomach twisted. I looked up, playing my flashlight over where the figure should have been. Nothing. Just the empty forest. Again, I tried to laugh it off, but it came out weak, shaky. "Get a grip, Jake," I muttered. It had to be a trick of the light, maybe some artifact from the long exposure. But the more pictures I took, the more the figures showed up. Always just on the edge. Always almost fading into the blackness. I don't know what possessed me to try and find them. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe just stubbornness. I grabbed my flashlight and started towards the edge of the clearing, my camera dangling from my neck. The trees loomed tall above me, their branches knitting together, blocking out the sky. The farther in I walked, the darker it became, until I could see nothing but that narrow beam of light from my flashlight. My breath echoed loud in my ears, harsh and uneven. I tripped over something, a pile of old camping equipment, half buried under leaves. A torn tent, a rusted lantern, no sign of who it belonged to. My skin prickled all over. A light flickered through the trees ahead of me. I felt a jolt of relief. Maybe it was Tom and Lily. Maybe they'd seen me wandering and came to check on me. I pushed through the underbrush, following the light, but it kept moving, always just a bit further. I walked for what felt like ages, my legs aching, the forest closing in around me. Finally, I broke into a small clearing, panting. My heart sank. It was the same glade I'd set off from. I knew this tree with its weird, blank eyes scratched into the bark, a crude sign that hadn't been there. My flashlight sputtered, the beam growing weaker. I swore under my breath, giving it a whack with my palm. The light misfired. Suddenly, it could barely illuminate the ground immediately in front of me. That was when I saw them. Shadows moving across the clearing, but there was nothing there to cast them. No people, no animals, nothing but the empty air. The shadows twisted, shifting, sliding towards me. My breath caught in my throat, my hands shaking. I managed to stumble backward, the camera swinging onto my chest. I lifted it almost without thinking, snapping one last photo. The flash lit up the clearing for a split second, and in that moment, I saw it. A figure standing right behind me, its face barely visible. My face. I don't remember running back to my tent. I don't remember much of anything after that, just the blind panic, the branches tearing at my clothes, the darkness closing in from all sides. When finally I made it back, I collapsed inside, zipping the flap shut and huddling in the corner, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. The next morning, in daylight, was safe enough to look at the photos. My hands still shaking, I scrolled through them all, each image more distorted than the last. That final photo, though, the figure in it was as clear as crystal. My face stared back at me, yet not me. The eyes were hollow, empty. The mouth was twisted in a grimace. I deleted it. Picking up my gear, my hands still shaking, I turned my back on Eagle Rock and never looked back. I don't know what I saw that night. I don't want to know. But I'll never forget the way that shadow moved, reached for me, and wore my face. Story 3. Who knew I would miss the sound of two kids squabbling in the backseat of a car? Now here I was on October 3rd, gazing at the sun sinking behind the heavy darkness of Tennessee trees in Little Bear Campground, and the quiet seemed deafening. That silence that reminds you how alone you are. I had come out here seeking solitude, a little peace, perhaps in the breakup, the chance to be reunited with myself again. I needed to show that I still could. Solo camp, manage my company. I hadn't spent time by myself in so long. While walking, I picked up some wood. There was plenty around with fallen branches from the pine and oak trees. I heard it then. Soft, crunching footfalls slowly circling the camp. I stopped and squinted at the tree line. Probably just a deer, I told myself. Maybe a raccoon searching for leftovers. I shook it off, tossed a couple more logs on the pile at my elbow, and trudged back towards the fire pit. Nonetheless, a sensation of being observed still hung in the air, like someone, or rather something, lay just beyond sight, listening. I tried to laugh it off. "You're getting jumpy, Eli," I whispered to myself. While igniting the fire, watching it crackle to life, I reminisced about my time as a scout. Then I recalled our troop leader, Mr. Henson, always warning the rest of us not to wander too far from camp at night. He would say, "The forest has eyes, boys. It has a sense of feeling when you are out of your element." At the time, it had been a big joke, with talk of Bigfoot and creepy crawlies. But now, standing there in the fading light, it didn't seem so funny. The woods were a different place alone. An adventure had become a living thing ready to swallow you up if given the chance. I sat down and tried to relax for the evening, heated some beans over the fire, opened a beer. The usual camping routine. I attempted to blend the heat of the flames with the chill in the October sky, combining them into something close to peace. But then I noticed it. My belongings, little things, appeared as if someone had shifted them. My backpack was moved a couple of feet from where I left it, its zipper half open. Next to the tent flap, my lantern was now tipped onto its side, nearly tumbled into the dirt. I scoured the clearing, frowning. No footprints except my own. I even looked closer, just to be safe. Nothing. I felt a spin of nausea in my stomach, but I dismissed it. Probably just rolled, I told myself. Ground's uneven after all. Still, I never got rid of that feeling. The one that told me I wasn't alone. It was when I finally hoisted myself into my sleeping bag that I zonked out. I felt lethargic, as if I hadn't slept for days. I guess I fell asleep pretty fast, but it was no restful sleep. I continued to come in and out of sleep, the dreams overlapping with the end stages of our flickering fire and the sounds coming from the trees outside. Eventually, though, I woke, or half woke, and grabbed my water bottle. That's when I saw it. The notebook that I'd been using to write down a few ideas was open. And there, in shaky, uneven letters, was a note. "We're all watching." For a moment, my heart stopped. I rubbed my eyes as if I were dreaming, but the words didn't go away. "We're all watching." I roused to sit up, head aching, ears scraping for the faintest sound through the thin cloth of the tent. Nothing. Only the wind, if it was wind at all, ruffling the leaves. My mouth went dry. I grabbed the flashlight, my hand trembling as I turned it on to illuminate the darkness. I looked around the tent, then opened the flap enough to peer out. The fire was out. Thick darkness lay outside, pressing in on all sides. I was a child again, afraid of the monsters in the closet, but this time I knew they were real. The rest of the night was a blur, a haze of half-sleep and trembling fear. All it took was a twig snapping or a branch rustling for me to hold my breath, flashlight in hand. As the first light of dawn finally came through, I crawled out of the tent, my entire body sore and aching. The campsite was exactly as I left it, except for the footprints. They surrounded the tent, overlapping one another. I felt sick, bile rising in my throat. It wasn't just one person. There had been several, and they'd been close. Too close. Watching me while I slept. I packed my stuff together as quickly as possible, shoving everything into my backpack with quavering fingers. Breakfast? Forget it. All I wanted was to leave. However, as I was leaving, my eyes caught something. A figure, just beyond the tree line. Looming, silent, nearly one with the dark. I squinted, my heart beating aggressively in my chest. "Hey!" I called, my voice cracking. The figure didn't move. I moved ahead a bit, but it turned and slipped into the tangle of trees before I could get near enough to see more than a blur. My skin crawled. I didn't wait around to see if it would return. That night, I parked my car miles away from Little Bear Campground at a rest area and slept there. That figure, the note in my notebook, those footprints circling my tent, I couldn't shake them. I had to tell someone, so the next morning I drove to the ranger station. I told it all to the ranger on duty, my brow furrowing as I explained what had occurred. When I mentioned the figure, he asked me to describe it. Dark jacket, tall, face hidden by shadows. The ranger nodded slowly, and I watched as he seemed to mull over my story. "We don't have anyone on staff who looks like that," he said. "And you're not the first to say something like this. Several years ago, some campers went missing from that site. No trace, just gone." I felt a shiver course through me and my legs weakened. I mumbled a thank you to the ranger, not knowing what else to say, and left. I never returned to Little Bear. I never camped alone again. Mr. Henson would always tell us that the forest had eyes, and now I believe him.